Hey guys, welcome to this tutorial. We're going to build ourselves a little rock, paper, scissors game. And I created this design here for us to use in this tutorial. So we've got this icon here for the rock, and this is for the paper, and this is the scissor. And I also have this little icon for the computer. As we're going to play against the computer, we're going to randomly make the computer make a choice, and we're going to compete against that. We can actually look at the finished game. I can make this a little bigger. So as you can see, if we click one here, we saw that we won now, because this is the computer choice, and we make this choice. So we mark this one with a yellow circle when we select one of the three here. And then the computer makes a move, and we can see down here in the display who's winning. It's not much design, and you can of course design it more if you want to do that. I'm into very minimalistic design styles, so I like this one. So, in this tutorial we're going to learn a lot of stuff actually. We're going to set up event listeners. We're going to learn how to use a lookup object when we decide if we have won or not. And we're also going to create a promise, and we're going to use that promise to wait a little while before we continue on in our code. And this one is used for when we press here. You can see that I'm randomly showing different ones here, because we could just have the computer selects one instantly, but that's no fun. So we're going to create this one where the user visually can see that the computer actually randomizes stuff here and select one. So that's great. So let's get into the code. Make sure to download the starter files. I've provided a link down below the video. And also, as usual, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Okay, so make sure to download the starter files. You have two folders there. You have one with the finished game, and you have one that says start here. And it's of course the one that says start here that you're going to use for this tutorial. And inside that folder we have a few files here. We have one index.html, we have a few images. That's of course the images that I created for this tutorial. And we have one script.js file and a styles.css file. The index.html file, I've already set this one up for you, so you don't have to create anything inside of this file. What I'm doing here is that I create the image for the computer. I also have a div that I call the button wrapper, where I have my three buttons. That's images that I set up here. And the most important thing to note here is that I'm using a data attribute on the images that I call type. So I set this one for rock, paper, and scissors, and we're going to grab these values in the JavaScript code later on. So check this out if you want to know how I structured my HTML. Okay, so let's go back to the starter files code. It will look like this when you start up the index.html file. I haven't set up a server for this one, so you have to just open up the index.html file in your browser. So as you can see, it doesn't look that good now. We just have these images here, so we have to style this sucker before we move on. So inside our styles.css file, I have created this little line here. Style goes here, so you won't miss it. Okay, so we have an ID of app. That's the one that wraps our complete game. We're going to text align the sender. This will center the content inside the app div. We set the font family to just Arial, and font size, yeah, we can set it to 2 rem, and a padding of 40 pixels. Let's see what we've got so far. Yeah, now it's centered, but we have to also create some styles for the other things here. So we have our button wrapper, button dash wrapper. This is a class, so you have a dot here, and we're going to display it as flex. And justify content, sender. Then we have our button. This class is on each button image, so it will style all three button images. We set a margin of 20 pixels just to give it some space. We want the cursor to be a pointer, as this is not a button, it's an image, so I changed the cursor for it. We have a width of 120 pixels, and these ones are, as usual when I do stuff, just my preferences. You can change the width and height if you want to do that. And we set the height to exactly the same, 120 pixels. And we can set the box sizing to border box. All right, and save it and see what we've got. As you can see, we got some spacing here because we're flexing this one now, and it looks actually great, but we haven't finished this one yet, so we have to make some more classes here and style them. Yeah, we're going to style when we hover over the button. I'm just setting the opacity to 0.8. This one. Then we have the computer, and that's this image up here. I want this one to be a little bit smaller. So we set, yeah, of course I'm going to do like this so you see what I'm doing. So we set the width to 100 pixels and the height to 100 pixels. And I also want to set a filter on this one because I want to gray it out a little bit, as we can't click on this one. Grayscale 80%. Save it and see what we've got. It's a little bit smaller now, and that's great. Okay, we have one more thing to do here, and that's to create a selected class. We set the border to 8 pixels, solid and orange, and a border radius of 50%. So this is all the CSS that we need for this game. Save it and see that everything is working. And this, the last one, the selected one, is when we click on a button here. You can see that I'm highlighting the button so we know what choice the user made. Okay, so that's our styles.css. Make sure that you save it also. And we're going to be working inside our script.js file for the rest of this tutorial. Immediately invoked function expression. And you can use this one so you don't pollute the global scope. Otherwise, if you don't want to use this, you can just write the code inside of this file. I have the habit of using these ones when I do stuff like this. Okay, so the first thing we have to do, we want to grab our elements from the DOM. So first we have our buttons from the document.query selector. And we're going to use query selector all because we have 3 different buttons. They all have the same class name of button, like this. So we have all 3 buttons in this const now, and we can loop through them later on and create an event listener for them. Then we have our computer image, document, query selector. And this is just query selector, not all for this one, because we just have one computer. .computer is the class name of that one. And the last one is going to be the output. And this is where we display the text if the user has won or lost, or if it's a draw. Document.query selector .output. And of course, these are just class names, as I said, that I've set up here in the HTML. So we have the class of computer, we have a class of button on each of these images here. So it's nothing fancy going on here. Whoops, this one should be there. Okay, so now we have our different images and buttons in our JavaScript code, so that's great. Then we're going to create a lookup object. And you can use a lookup object instead of using, for example, an if and else statement. So if we create combinations, and we create the regular JavaScript object here, then we have the rock, and the rock is winning over scissors. Then we have the paper, and the paper is winning over the rock, and scissors is winning over paper. If we grab the property paper, for example, we get the value of rock, and we know that paper will win over rock. So this is how this object is structured. The value here tells what the key will win over. And we're going to use this to calculate who's winning later on. Okay, we also need to create our keys from this object. So object dot keys, and we have combinations. This will give us an array of all the keys, and then we can loop through them. And we're going to use this for the computer to randomly select rock, paper, or scissors later on. Then we have a const. I'm going to bring this up, that we call wait time. I set this to 50, and this one is milliseconds. The wait time is how long we're going to wait when I can show you here. If I click here, so the wait time is how long it is before the next one is showing here. So if we set this to very slow, it will be very slow here. So we wait 50 milliseconds before we make another random choice here for the computer. So that's what the wait time is. And then we have something that I call scramble count. Don't know if that is a really good name, and I set that one to 20. And this one, if I go back here again and click, so if I press here, this will be 20 images and with 50 milliseconds between each image. And then it stops after randomly gone through 20 choices for the computer. And this one is just for visualizing things, that it will look a little bit more fun, because we could just click here and the computer will instantly select a choice. So yeah, just visually not needed, but I thought it was kind of cool to make it show that the computer actually is randomizing stuff and select one. All right, back to the code. At the bottom of this code, we're going to have the event listeners for the buttons. So we have our buttons in this const, and for each of the buttons, we have a button, an inline arrow function. On each button, we add an event listener. And it's going to be a click event. And we're going to invoke a function that we call handle click. So this is it. This will loop through all of our buttons and set up an event listener for each of them. So just above the event listeners, we can create our handle click, const handle click. And I'm using an arrow function now. You can use a regular function also, of course. This one is going to take in the event. And if we use arrow function, we can't use this. If you have a regular function, we can use this. But I'm actually not a fan of using this if you don't need to do it. So instead of using this, we're going to use e.target when we grab the value from the button. We're going to reset all buttons. So we remove the yellow outline and then we set it on the button we click. And we can do that by looping through them for each. We have a button, an inline function, and we set the button.classList to button. This will make sure that we remove the selected class. So we'll have no highlight on our buttons, and that's great. Then we set the class selected on click button. So e.target.classList equals button and selected. So this will add this class to the button that we clicked on. E.target is the button that we clicked on. Then we want to grab the value, rock, scissors, or paper. And if you remember that I mentioned in my index.html, I set this data attribute here that I call type, rock, paper, scissors. So we can just grab this one from the button that we click. So go back to our script.js. And then in a const that we call player pick, we can get e.target.dataset. This is how you grab the data attribute, and it's called type. This player pick const will hold the value of rock, paper, or scissors that we set in the index.html file. Okay. We can actually save this now and see what we've got so far. What? My file disappeared. Why is it so? All right, guess I have to open it up again. Yeah, it's working now. Okay, And you can see we have a little bit of opacity change when we hover over our buttons. Then guess I didn't save the file. Back inside of the code, save it, reload. And as you can see, when we click the buttons, we get the highlight. And that's great. We have to create the logic now for the game because we have everything as we want it visually now. Okay, so inside the handle click, we have set everything on the UI so we can call another function that we're going to call comp move. That's for computer move. And we're going to send in the player pick to that function. And we create that function just above the handle click function, const comp move. And yet again, I'm using an arrow function, and you can use a regular function if you're more comfortable with that. First, we create a const that we call computer pick. And we're going to do some calculations here now. And we created this keys array up here. So we have all the keys from this object, rock, paper, and scissors. And that means that we can calculate a random value from this array. So from the keys, we are going to math.floor and then math.random. I think I should remove this sidebar. And we're going to multiply it with keys.length. And this will give us a random value from this array. When we multiply math random with the keys length, we get the value between 0 and 2 if we floor it. So this will randomly be keys 0, keys 1, or keys 2. So that's how the computer makes its choice. Then we can change the image. We want to show what choice the computer made. So computer.src, the computer is an image that we grabbed up here from the DOM. So we can set the source to a new one. And we have backticks because I'm using a template literal. We have a $sign, curly braces, and computer pick. This is, for example, going to be a rock. So we get the rock here, and then we just add .png, and we have the image because the image is called rock, paper, and scissors. So let's save it and see how it works out. Yeah, the computer selected that's the paper, and then the computer selected the scissors. You see, it randomly selects one each time we click on some of these buttons. And as you can see now, it instantly selects one here. So we're going to create this first to get the game up and running. And then I'm going to show you how to make this scramble here, where we visually going to show that the computer is randomly selecting something. So back to the code, the computer has made a choice. And we can call another function that we call calculate winner. And we send in the player pick and also the computer pick. We could also have them in global variables, but I think it's more nice to have them locally scoped, so we don't have that much global variables up here. All right, so we have to create the calculate winner function, const, and I'm going to remove this again, const calculate winner equals, and we have the player pick and the computer pick. It's an arrow function. And I'm going to use a regular if statement here because we have three different ways this can go. The computer can win, the player can win, and it can be a draw. So if this is where we're going to use our lookup object, so we know what the player pick is. So from our combinations, we grab that property, player pick. So if it's, for example, scissors, then we grab this one, then we know that it has to be paper for the scissors to win. And we can just compare this with a computer pick. If this one is paper, then we know that it's a win. Otherwise, we lose, or it can be a draw. And this is really convenient to have this kind of lookup object here. As you can see, as we're just selecting properties, and we instantly get the value that we can compare here. So that's great. Then we want to show this. So we have this output div that we also grabbed up here. So we can change the inner HTML on that one and set a new text. So inner HTML player wins. Okay. Then else if. Now we're going to calculate if it's a draw, and that's an easy one. We have the player pick. If that one equals to the computer pick, then it's a draw. And we set the output dot inner HTML to draw. And then if we're not winning and if it's not a draw, then we know that the computer has won. So we set the output inner HTML to computer wins. All right. And we call that function down here. Yes. So we should be able to try this out now. So we make a choice. It's a draw. It's working. Player wins. Yeah. The computer selected the same again. And you can, of course, make a better random function if you want to do that. Yeah, it seems to be working great. All right, so the game is working now, but we have to make this visually appealing also. So we're going to create this one that I showed you, where we scramble this and make it a little bit nicer and a little bit more realistic, I think. So we have to refactor some stuff here. If we go down to the comp move, we're going to first mark this as async, because now we're going to await a promise inside of this one. The computer pick is going to be a let. And we can just set it to null to start with. So we can remove const from this one. Here we're going to have a for loop for let I equals to 0. We have I is less than scramble count. That's the value that we set up here before. So it's 20 now. This one is going to loop 20 times. And then I plus plus. And we create curly braces. So we can move this one computer pick inside here. And yeah, also this one, of course, like this. So it won't work now because we have to do some stuff here to get this to work, because we want to wait, as we said here, 50 milliseconds before it selects another one and show it. And we can do this little trick with promises. So we create a new function up here. And this is going to be a one-liner. Use promise to wait. We create a const that we call wait. This is an arrow function. We have one argument that we call milliseconds. And as this is an arrow function, we can make an implicit return. So we don't have to use the return statement. So we create a new promise. This promise is going to resolve to something. And we set the timeout. And here we call the resolve function. And we set the timeout to the milliseconds that we specify up here. So this is a neat little trick you can use to wait for stuff in your code. We can send in what millisecond value we want here and await this one. And if you're inside a function that has async marked on it, it will wait for this one before moving on in the code. So we can use that one now in the comp move. And just inside of our for loop, we can await, and we call that one wait, and we send in the wait time. So this will wait 50 milliseconds before it moves on with this code below here. And this is really great because this is exactly what we want. So save it, go back to our code, reload, click a button. And as you can see, it's working. I always love to see when stuff works the first time. Click another one. Yeah. And it's really easy now to modify this one. If you, for example, want the waiting time to be 500 and we want just 10 different moves here. Yeah, we have to reload it. You can see now that it's waiting longer and it's only 10, and then it, boom, displays who's winning. So we're not really using these steps before the last one. It's only the last one that the computer selects that we use to calculate who wins. I'm going to set these ones back now. So this is a rock, paper, scissors game in roughly 50 rows of JavaScript and a little bit of styling. I hope you learned something in this one. I think there's some valuable stuff inside here, especially this one with a promise and how you can use it to wait inside of a for loop. That's really handy sometimes. Yeah, it was fun creating this one, and see you in another one.